let's go ahead and get started talking about interest. And interest is one of those things that usually is a good subject for students, because if you have student loans, these things are kind of important to your future. Simple interest. Simple interest is a great place to start. And to start off with, I'm going to give you a couple formulas. Simple interest is this. Your interest is equal to your principal times your rate times your time. Sometimes I call this the PERT formula. So I'll go ahead and spell that out down here, that I is usually your interest, P is your principal, R is going to be your rate, and T is going to be the amount of time. Now, compound interest is where things get a little bit more complicated. Now, we still have something similar to this, but with this, we'll say that at any given time, the amount that you have, either in a loan or an account, is going to be equal to your principal times something a little bit more complicated. We've got 1 plus what we call this R over N. R is that rate, and then N is going to be the number of times that you're compounding. And this is going to be to the NT. So with this, we've got, these are the same things, it's just that A is going to be equal to the amount of account or loan. N is going to be the number of times compounded. And if you start thinking about this, this starts to make sense. If I'm charging a certain amount of interest rate per year, say compound quarterly, I'm only charging a quarter of that interest. So it'd be 100% of that plus a quarter of that interest. And then I just have to, and I'm charging this amount of interest this many times per year. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and work some examples, shall we? Let's say that a man borrows $2,000 at 7% interest per year. How much interest does he owe after 1 year? Or how much does he owe after 1 year? Well, we're going to just go ahead and say we've got this interest is equal to that principal times that rate. You probably should have used the lowercase r, and then times our time. Okay, so here our interest is going to be equal to our principal, which is that initial amount borrowed, it's that $2,000. This rate, by the way, notice that we never put our percent numbers in here as a percent. We have to change it to decimals. So it's always going to be 0.07. We change that to 0.07, not 7. And then our time here is 1. And when I multiply 2,000 times 0.07 times 1, I'll end up with 140. So I could say that we've got, what this means is I've got $140 in interest, so my new amount owed is going to be that original plus my interest. That's going to be $2,140. This seems like a pretty simple thing. I will also say, interest is one of those things that if you're using it well, it can work for you very, very well, or it can work against you. This is one of the reasons why I think this is a pretty important topic to learn. And before becoming a teacher, I worked in the financial sector. Briefly, I worked for a credit card, and that's where I learned that credit cards are I believe it's a $3 trillion per year business. No lie, $3 trillion with a T. Okay, let's go ahead and do another one. Okay, well, let's see. Let's say that a loan is taken out for $1,200 at a rate of 4% per year. If the loan is paid back in 3 months, how much interest is charged? Or how much is owed? Well, this one gets interesting because thinking about this, I still have my simple principal times my rate times my time, but here I'm doing a couple interesting things with my time. It's 3 months of a year. So my interest is still unknown. My principal is that $1,200. My rate is 4%. But my time is 3 months out of 1 year. So I have to say my time is going to be 3 months out of 12, or this is just going to be equal to 1/4. It's 1/4 of a year. Now I can go ahead and figure out what my interest is. Or if you prefer, I could say this is 0.25 years. Okay, let's go ahead and do this. I'll say my interest is equal to my principal, it's that $1,200, times my rate of 0.04, and then my time here is that 0.25 years. A little tougher to do at that point. Well, let's go ahead and figure this out. Oops. I've got 1,200 times my 0.04 times my 0.25. So it looks like after 3 months, there's going to be $12 in interest. So it means that I've got $12 in interest, which means that the amount I owe is going to be this 1,200. I'll just go ahead and do this. There's a little thought bubble over here. Is going to be this, 1,200, my original, plus my interest of $12. That's going to be $1,212. So this is what happens if I've got a smaller portion than my original. I'm going to have to do a little bit of calculation with my time. Alrighty, let's move on to a slightly more difficult type of question. And I'm going to show you this in two different ways. Let's say that we've got $10,000 invested at 6% per year, but we're going to compound quarterly. This basically means that when I say compounded quarterly, this means that I'm going to add the interest to the principal 4 times per year. Now what we're going to do, we can go ahead and figure this out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to figure out what my investment is, and then I'm going to add my interest. So what's going to happen is in this first quarter, again, we're going to have that principal is equal to, my interest is going to be equal to my principal times my rate times my time. So here, in this first quarter, I'm going to take that $10,000, multiply that by my 6%, and then I'm going to say, well, what's my first quarter's interest? Okay, let's go ahead and do that. $10,000 times 0.06 times 1 quarter, which is 0.25. Oh, so it looks like I've got $150 interest. So that after the first quarter, my principal is now going to be $10,000 plus 150. That's going to be $10,150. Okay. What happens after my second quarter? Well, my interest is going to be equal to that principal times my rate times my time. So this is going to be $10,150 times that 6%, 0.06, times this 1 quarter. Well, 10,150 times 0.06 times that 0.25. Oh, looks like I've got a little bit more this time. I'd expect that. My principal has gone up. So here my interest is going to be $152.25. Okay, well let's take that $152.25 and add it to my new principal. So after my second quarter, my principal is going to be equal to, let's see here, let's add this to 10,150. Oh, so now my principal is $10,302.25. Wow. Okay, let's see what happens when I do it again. My interest is equal to that principal times the rate times the time, so this is going to be $10,302.25. Let's multiply that by that my 6% interest, and again, this is quarterly, so it's 1 quarter of a year. Well, let's take this principal, let's multiply that by my 6% interest, and my quarter of a year. Okay, so this is now $154, and now I'm going to have to do a little bit of rounding. It's 154, 53, and then 0.03 of a dollar. So I'm just going to round this to 53. I'm going to go say rounded. Okay, so after that third quarter, let's go ahead and take that 154.53 and add that to my principal of 10302.25. Okay, and now I've got, whoops, I must have 154.53 plus 10302.25. Put my decimal in the wrong spot. So now my principal is going to be $10,456.78. Wow, this is getting more complicated, but home stretch on this one. Let's do this last quarter. Interest is equal to this principal times rate times our time. Now we're going to take this interest as $1,456.78, and notice the rate and the time stay the same. This is this 0.06 times this 1/4. Okay. Well, let's take that number, multiply it by 0.06, and that 0.25. So this last interest I will have is going to be, looks like 156.85. So after that fourth quarter, so this is that full year now, our principal is going to be, well, let's add our 156.85 to this number. So we've got 10,456.78, and let's add that to that 156.85. And we've got $10,613.63. Now, if this were just 6% interest, that would have just been $10,600. So you'll see that this compounding adds some. It accumulates interest a little bit faster when we compound. So our principal after 1 year is $10,613.63. Let's do this another way. Let's go ahead and use this other formula that I gave us, that amount is equal to our principal times 1 plus my rate over the number of times compounded to the NT. Now I said that my principal was $10,000. I said that my rate was 6%. When I compound quarterly, I'm basically saying that I've got 4. This is 4 times per year. And here our time is just going to be 1 year. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out these pieces. Let's plug this in and see what happens. I want to see if we take my amount here is going to be equal to this 10,000. I'm going to have 1 plus this 0.06 over 4. And then I'm going to have 4 times 1. And I need to figure out what's going to go on here. I'm going to zoom in here. It's going to make it a little easier. I'm writing small. So let's figure out what happens. First of all, that 4 times 1 is just going to be 4. So I've got 10,000 times something in here. I've got 4 right there. Now, let's figure out what this is. This is going to be 1 plus 0.06 divided by 4. Okay. 0.015. So this is going to end up being 10,000 times 1.015 to the 4th power. Now, notice that we're using our order of operations. First, we figured out what's going on inside of our parentheses. Next, we need to apply our exponent. So I'm going to take this 1.015 to the power of 4, and I've got a big long number here. It looks like a 1.6013. Well, let's take this number, and if I want to, I can go ahead and say, okay, this is going to be 10,000 times 1.061364 if I want to. I can round a little bit. Well, let's take this and then multiply that by that 10,000. Hey, look at that. I've got $10,613, and in this case 64 cents. I'm off in the pennies place, and honestly, if I hadn't rounded here, this would have been a 64, because it would have been just a little bit bigger. I ended up rounding. So this is another way of figuring out our interest using our compound, or an amount of an account, using a compound interest formula. Okay, I hope this made sense, and if you have any questions, shoot me a message.